The steering wheel of my Lexus was cool under my palms, but my hands were sweating. It was that familiar, visceral reaction my body had whenever I turned onto Oak Street, the street where I grew up, and the street where my parents still lived. My phone had been buzzing incessantly for the last hour. 7 missed calls from my mother, Linda. 2 text messages from my sister, Tiffany. Emergency family meeting, the last text read. Don't be late. Mom is freaking out. I checked the rearview mirror. At 34, I looked tired. Not the kind of tired that a good night's sleep fixes, but the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a load too heavy for their shoulders for far too long. I adjusted the collar of my blazer. To the world, I was Ashley, the senior CFO of a mid-sized tech firm, a woman who commanded boardrooms and managed multi-million-dollar portfolios. To the people inside the house at 402 Oak Street, I was just Ashley, the one who was good with numbers, the one who didn't have a husband or kids, and therefore, the one who had no excuse not to help. I reached into the passenger seat and grabbed the bottle of vintage Cabernet I'd picked up. It was a 2015 Silver Oak, pricey and smooth. A peace offering. Or maybe a bribe to keep the criticism to a minimum. I parked in the driveway, noting that my brother Brandon's rusty Mustang was taking up 2 spots. Of course it was. Brandon, the golden child, the 38-year-old entrepreneur, whose startups had a faster expiration date than a carton of milk left in the sun. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and walked to the front door. Before I could even knock, it swung open. Finally. Tiffany stood there, phone in hand, not even looking up from her screen. Mom, she's here. We can eat now. She turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open. No hello, Ashley. No how was your day, Ashley. Just a confirmation of my presence as a utility. I walked in, the smell of roast beef and heavy perfume hitting me instantly. Ashley, darling, you're late, my mother's voice floated from the dining room. She sounded frantic, but there was an underlying current of excitement that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I walked into the dining room. My father, Robert, was already seated at the head of the table, nursing a scotch. Brandon was there too, lounging in his chair like a king on a throne, and next to him sat Jessica, his fiancée. Jessica was a woman whose ambition was only matched by her vocal fry. She was currently inspecting her manicure with a bored expression. I came as soon as I could, Mom, I said, placing the wine on the table. I had a meeting run late. Is everything okay? Tiffany said it was an emergency. Sit, my father grumbled, waving his hand dismissively at the wine bottle. We have news. Big news. I took my usual seat, the one with the wobbly leg near the kitchen door, the spot easiest to get up from to fetch refills. So Brandon started, grinning. He had that look he always got when he wanted money, a mix of charm and desperation that my parents mistook for charisma. As you know, things with the new venture are exploding. In a good way. He's a genius, my mother cooed, placing a bowl of mashed potatoes on the table. My son, the visionary. I kept my face neutral. The last visionary project was a drop-shipping business that ended with a garage full of unsellable fidget spinners and a $5,000 debt that I had quietly paid off to keep the bailiffs away. That's great, Brandon, I said, my voice flat. Is that the emergency? No, silly, Jessica chimed in, finally looking at me. Her eyes scanned my outfit, a designer suit I usually downplayed around them, with a hint of envy. That's just the context. My father cleared his throat. We've been doing some thinking. About the future of this family. About legacy. He looked at Brandon with a swelling pride that he had never, not once, directed at me. Your brother is settling down. He's going to make this family proud. He needs support. He needs a foundation. And that involves me, how? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. We're celebrating, my mother interrupted, clapping her hands. Brandon and Jessica are moving in. I blinked. Moving in? Here. But I thought the wedding was in 6 months. I thought you guys were looking at condos in the city. Plans change, Brandon said smoothly. Capital needs to be reinvested in the business right now. Rent is dead money. Mom and Dad agreed it makes more sense for us to stay here, save up, and build the empire. Okay, I said slowly. The house was a 4-bedroom, but one room was Dad's study, one was the guest room filled with Mom's crafting hoarding, and one was mine, the attic conversion I had paid $30,000 to renovate 5 years ago when I needed a place to stay after a bad breakup. I had stayed there paying them rent, ever since, mostly to keep an eye on their declining health and finances. So, where are they staying? I asked, looking around the table. Is Dad giving up the study? The table went silent. My father took a long sip of his scotch. My mother busied herself with a napkin. Tiffany let out a short, sharp giggle. Well, my father said, his voice dropping an octave, the tone he used when he was laying down the law. That's actually why we called you over, Ashley. He looked me dead in the eye, and for the first time that night, I saw the trap. It wasn't an emergency. It was an ambush. We've all agreed, my mother said, her smile tight and overly bright, that Brandon and Jessica will be taking the attic suite. It's the only space big enough for a couple. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. The attic suite. My sanctuary. The place I had insulated, painted, and furnished. The place where I kept my work files, my peace, and my sanity. That's my room, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Technically, Brandon said, picking at a loose thread on the tablecloth, it's Mom and Dad's house. So it's their room. But I paid for the renovation, I argued, my heart rate spiking. I pay rent. I pay the electric bill. I pay for the groceries you're eating right now. Don't be petty, Ashley, my father snapped, slamming his glass down. This is family. Your brother needs the space. You're a single woman. You're hardly ever here anyway with that job of yours. You don't need all that square footage. Guess you'll have to sleep on the floor like old times, Tiffany laughed, or maybe the couch pulls out. I looked at them. Really looked at them. My mother, nodding in agreement with my father's cruelty. My brother smirking because he knew he had won before the game even started. My sister, enjoying my humiliation. You want me to move out? I asked. No, my mother exclaimed, acting shocked. We want you to downsize. The sewing room is free. Well, once we move the boxes. You can fit a twin bed in there. The sewing room. A closet with a window, filled with moldy boxes of fabric scraps. This is temporary, Brandon added, just until the IPO launches. Maybe 2 years. 2 years. They wanted me to live in a closet for 2 years while he played CEO in the suite I built. The silence that followed their proposal was heavy, suffocating. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting down the seconds of my patience. You can't be serious, I said, looking from my mother to my father. I have contracts in that office. I have secure servers set up. I can't just move into a storage closet. See? Jessica sighed, turning to Brandon. I told you she'd be difficult. She doesn't understand the pressure you're under. It's not about being difficult, Jessica, I said, my voice sharpening. It's about respect. I have lived here for 5 years. I have contributed more to this household financially than anyone else at this table. Money, 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 my father groaned, rubbing his temples. That's all you ever talk about, Ashley. You think because you push papers around at some office, you're better than us. Your brother is building a legacy. He's a creator. You're just a worker bee. The insult landed like a slap. A worker bee. I managed the finances for a company worth $200 million. I had saved this family from foreclosure twice in the last decade without them even knowing the full extent of it. Robert, calm down, my mother soothed him, then turned her gaze on me. It was the look she used when I was a child, the one that meant do as you're told or else. Ashley, listen to reason. Brandon and Jessica are starting a family soon. They need privacy. They need space. You are single. You are alone. Why do you need a master suite? It's selfish. Selfish. The word echoed in my head. I'm not selfish, Mom. I'm an adult who pays for her space. Well, starting next month, you won't be paying for it, my father declared. Because Brandon is taking it. If you don't like the sewing room, you can find somewhere else. But let me be clear, this house belongs to me. And I say who sleeps where. My stomach churned. It wasn't just about the room. It was the erasure. It was the fact that my comfort, my dignity, meant absolutely nothing to them compared to Brandon's comfort. And another thing, Brandon added, leaning forward, I'm going to need the garage, too. For inventory. My car is in the garage, I said. It was a heated garage, necessary for the harsh winters and protecting my car, which was one of the few luxuries I allowed myself. Park on the street, Brandon shrugged. The Mustang needs protection. It's a classic. It's a rust bucket, Brandon. I snapped, finally losing my cool. It hasn't run in 3 years. Hey. He slammed his fist on the table. Don't you talk about my projects like that. You have no vision, Ashley. That's your problem. You play it safe. You hoard your little salary, and you judge people who actually take risks. Risks. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Gambling on crypto and buying broken cars isn't a risk, Brandon. It's stupidity. And now you want me to subsidize it by giving up my home. That's enough. My father stood up, his face red. I will not have you disrespect your brother in my house. He is a man. He is the future head of this family. You will show him respect. I stared at my father. The misogyny wasn't new, but it had never been this naked, this aggressive. He didn't see me as a daughter. He saw me as a resource to be harvested until I was dry, and then discarded when a better option, a male heir, appeared. Fine, I said, my voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt cold. If that's how it is. Good, my mother said, instantly relaxing. She smiled, picking up her fork. I knew you'd understand. Now, let's eat before the roast gets cold. Oh, and Ashley. We'll need you to have your things out by Sunday. Brandon wants to paint the walls. That gray color you chose is so depressing. Sunday. I repeated. Today is Thursday. Better get moving then, Tiffany chirped, scrolling through Instagram. Maybe if you hurry, you can help Brandon move his boxes in. I looked down at my plate. The roast beef looked gray and unappealing. I felt like I was in a fever dream. The absolute entitlement. The gaslighting. They were kicking me out of my own sanctuary, giving me 3 days' notice, and expecting me to stay for dinner and help them move. I'm not hungry, I said, pushing my chair back. Sit down, my father commanded. We are having a family dinner. No, I stood up. I think I need to use the restroom. Don't take too long, my mother warned. We're cutting the cake soon. Jessica bought a lovely tiramisu. I walked out of the dining room, my legs feeling like lead. I didn't go to the restroom immediately. I stopped in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to breathe. I needed to get out. I needed to leave. But a lifetime of conditioning, the need to be the good girl, the helper kept my feet glued to the floor. As I stood there, I heard their voices carry from the dining room. They thought I was out of earshot. They thought I was broken. God, she's such a drama queen, Tiffany's voice drifted out. Don't worry, my father's voice rumbled. She'll cave. She always does. Where else is she going to go? She needs us. Did you get her check for the utilities this month? Brandon asked. Yes, my mother replied. I cashed it yesterday. Don't worry, sweetie. We have enough to cover the deposit for your venue now. I froze. The blood drained from my face. The world seemed to stop spinning. I stood in the hallway, paralyzed. The air in the corridor felt thick, like underwater. The venue. They weren't just kicking me out of my room. They were using my money, the money I gave them for the mortgage and the electric bill, to pay for Brandon's wedding venue. Are you sure she won't notice? Jessica asked. Her voice wasn't worried, it was conspiratorial. I mean, if she sees the bank statement. Ashley never looks at our statements, my mother laughed softly. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. She just transfers the money and thinks she's saving us. She likes to feel important. It's pathetic, really. She thinks she's buying our love, but she's just paying her dues. It's the least she can do, seeing as she's never going to give us grandchildren. The words hit me like physical blows. Pathetic. Paying her dues. Never give us grandchildren. Something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud break. It wasn't a scream or a sob. It was a quiet, metallic snap, like a lock clicking into place. For years, I had been the provider. The ATM. The fixer. I had thought that if I was successful enough, generous enough, dutiful enough, they would finally see me. They would finally love me as much as they loved Brandon. But standing in that hallway, listening to them mock my generosity and steal my money, I realized the truth. They didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a resource. And you don't thank a resource. You exploit it until it's empty. My tears dried up instantly. The lump in my throat vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It was the same feeling I got in the boardroom when a hostile takeover was imminent. The emotions shut down. The logic took over. Objective: protect assets. Minimize losses. Exit strategy. I took a deep breath, smoothed down the front of my blazer, and walked into the bathroom. I didn't use it. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I had a joint account with my parents, a remnant from college that I used to transfer their allowance. I checked the balance. It was nearly drained. They had taken the $3,000 I sent yesterday and moved it. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I navigated to the settings and hit Remove Link. Then, I went to the bill pay section for the house utilities, electricity, water, gas, internet, all of which were in my name because my father had bad credit. Cancel service. Effective date, Monday. I gave them the weekend. I was generous like that. I looked at myself in the mirror. The tired woman from an hour ago was gone. In her place was someone cold. Someone dangerous. I flushed the toilet for effect, washed my hands, and walked back into the dining room. They stopped talking when I entered. Brandon was already digging into the tiramisu. Feeling better? Mom asked, fake concern plastered over her face. Much, I said, offering a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I've been thinking. You're right. My father looked surprised. I am. Yes, I nodded, sitting down but not pulling my chair in. Family comes first. Brandon needs the space. It was selfish of me to hold on to the attic. See? Brandon grinned, mouthful of cake. I told you she'd get it. Thanks, Ash. So I continued, keeping my voice steady. I'll move out. Sunday, like you asked. And the sewing room. Mom asked. I can clear the boxes tomorrow. No need, I said. I don't want to impose. I'll find a place. A friend's couch, maybe. Until I get back on my feet. Oh, Mom looked relieved. She didn't want me in the sewing room either. She just wanted me gone but still paying the bills. Well, that's very independent of you, Ashley. We're proud of you. Yeah, Tiffany muttered. Just don't come crying back when you can't afford rent. I won't, I promised. Oh, and Dad? About the worker bee comment earlier. My father grunted, what about it? You're right. I should focus more on my career. So I'm going to be working a lot of overtime. I might be hard to reach for a while. As long as the check's clear, Brandon joked, nudging Jessica. I smiled. It was the last genuine smile I would ever give them, because I knew something they didn't. Enjoy the tiramisu, I said. I'm going to start packing. I walked up the stairs to my attic sanctuary. As I closed the door, I didn't cry. I grabbed a stack of banker's boxes from my closet. I wasn't just packing clothes. I was packing evidence. Every receipt for the renovation. Every bank transfer record I kept in my filing cabinet. The original deed copy I had found years ago. I wasn't just leaving. I was preparing for war. The next 2 days were a blur of calculated movement. I moved like a ghost in the house. While they watched TV downstairs, laughing at sitcoms, I was dismantling my life upstairs. I didn't take everything. That was part of the plan. I left the furniture I had bought, the bed, the desk, the heavy armoire. If I took it, they would accuse me of being petty. If I left it, they would feel they had won a complete victory. Let them have the furniture. It was a sunk cost. What I took were the vitals. My server drives. My financial records. My jewelry. And the box of things from my grandmother, the only person in this family who had ever actually loved me. By Sunday morning, my car was packed. Need a hand? Brandon asked from the porch as I lugged the last box down. He was drinking coffee, wearing a bathrobe at 11 a.m. He didn't move to help. I got it, I said, putting the box in the trunk. So, he said, scratching his stomach. Where are you going? Some studio apartment in the bad part of town. Something like that, I lied. Well, don't worry. Once my company takes off, I'll buy you a nice condo. Maybe even with a view. The delusion was almost impressive. Good luck with the company, Brandon. Don't need luck, he tapped his temple. Got vision. Mom and Dad came out to wave goodbye. It was grotesque, really. They acted like I was going off to camp, not being evicted from my home so my brother could turn it into a man cave. Don't be a stranger, Ashley. Mom called out. And remember, rent is due on the 1st. I didn't wave back. I just got in my Lexus, reversed out of the driveway, and drove away. I watched 402 Oak Street disappear in my rearview mirror. A house of takers. I drove for 20 minutes, but I didn't head toward the bad part of town. I headed north, toward the hills. Toward the gated community of Silver Creek. I pulled up to the security gate. The guard, Mike, smiled when he saw me. Good afternoon, Ms. Miller. Home for the weekend? Home for good, Mike, I smiled back. The gate swung open. I drove up the winding road, past manicured lawns and fountains, until I reached the top of the hill. I pulled into the circular driveway of a modern, glass-and-stone estate. My estate. I hadn't been living in my parents' attic because I was broke. I lived there because I was lonely, and because I was saving 90% of my massive salary and bonuses as a CFO. 6 months ago, I had closed on this place, a $2.5 million foreclosure that I had snagged for $1.8 million in cash. I had never told them. Why would I? They would have just seen it as another asset of theirs. Our house. I walked inside. The foyer was vast, filled with natural light. It was silent. Beautifully, blissfully silent. No TV blaring. No passive-aggressive comments. Just space. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water from the smart fridge, and dialed a number on my phone. Henderson, a gruff voice answered. It's Ashley Miller, I said. I've moved out. Good, my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, replied. Did they sign the acknowledgement of residency termination? No, but I have the text messages demanding I leave. That's enough for constructive eviction if we need it. But I don't want to sue them yet. What's the play, Ashley? I want you to look into the mortgage on 402 Oak Street, I said, staring out at my infinity pool. I know they refinanced it 3 years ago to pay for Brandon's legal fees after that DUI. I want to know who holds the note. You think they're behind? I know they are. I was covering the payments but I stopped today. Without me they can't afford the interest, let alone the principal. Find out who holds the debt, Henderson. And if I find them? Buy it, I said coldly. I want my LLC to be the holder of their mortgage. Ashley, Henderson paused. If you do that, you become their bank. If they default. If they default, I foreclose, I finished. I want to own the roof over their heads. Not to save them. But to control the landing. Understood. I'll get the paperwork started. Welcome to the other side, Ms. Miller. I hung up. I walked into my living room, sat on my Italian leather sofa, and looked around. My brother had a vision. My parents had authority. But I had leverage. And I was about to teach them a lesson in economics they would never forget. 1 month later I didn't have to guess what was happening at my parents' house. I could see it. Not literally, though I did have the neighbors update me, but through the digital trail. Because I had cut off the utilities, the accounts had reverted to my father's name. But my father, being technologically illiterate, hadn't changed the recovery email address. Every overdue notice came straight to my inbox. Final notice, electricity. Past due, water. Credit alert, Robert Miller score decreased by 40 points. I sat in my home office, sipping an espresso, scrolling through the carnage. It had only been 30 days. Apparently, Brandon's vision didn't include paying bills. I decided to call my Uncle Joe. Joe was Dad's younger brother, a sweet man who was treated like the family doormat, much like I had been. He was the only one I kept in contact with. Hey, Uncle Joe, I said. How's everything? Ashley. Joe sounded relieved to hear my voice. Honey, where are you? Your mother has been, well, she's been a handful. I'm safe, Joe. I'm staying at a friend's, I lied. What's going on over there? It's a mess, Ash. A real mess. The power got cut off for 2 days last week. Brandon tried to fix the breaker, thinking it was a fuse, and nearly electrocuted himself. They had to pay a reconnection fee of $300. Let me guess, I said dryly. They blamed me. Oh yeah, Joe sighed. Your father is saying you sabotaged the accounts before you left. He's threatening to sue you, but he doesn't have the money for a lawyer. And Brandon? How's the startup? Joe lowered his voice. There is no startup, Ashley. I went over there for Sunday dinner, worst mistake of my life. Brandon spends all day in your old room playing video games. Jessica just orders packages from Amazon. They're fighting like cats and dogs because there's no money coming in. And Mom? She's in denial. She keeps saying Brandon is on the verge of a breakthrough. But I saw her crying in the kitchen. She asked if I knew where you were working now. She thinks you got a promotion and are hiding it. I didn't get a promotion, Joe, I said. I just stopped letting them bleed me dry. Good for you, honey. Listen, be careful. Brandon, he's desperate. I heard him talking on the phone to some guys. He owes money. Bad money. Not bank money. My grip tightened on the phone. Gambling debts? I think so. He was talking about odds and vig. Just stay away, okay? I will, Joe. Thanks. I hung up. So the golden child was a gambler. That explained the business capital needs. My phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail from my mother. It was the 10th one this week. I hadn't listened to the others, but I pressed play on this one. Ashley, pick up the phone. This is ridiculous. We know you're doing this on purpose. The internet is down again. Brandon needs the internet for his business. How can you be so selfish? We are your family. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of you. If you don't come over here and fix this, and bring a check for the back rent you owe us for leaving early, don't bother coming to Christmas. Do you hear me? You are ungrateful. The message ended with a click. Ungrateful. I laughed. It was a dark, cold sound in the empty room. I forwarded the voicemail to my evidence folder. Then I opened my email. There was a new message from Mr. Henderson. Subject, acquisition complete. Body, the LLC has successfully purchased the mortgage note for 402 Oak Street from the secondary lender. We now own the debt. They are 60 days past due. We can initiate foreclosure proceedings in 30 days. I leaned back in my chair. The trap was set. They were living in a house of cards, and I was the wind. But I wasn't going to blow it down just yet. I wanted them to feel the squeeze. I wanted them to understand what life really looked like without their safety net. I typed a reply to Henderson, hold on the foreclosure. Let's see what they do when the walls start closing in. 3 months had passed since I left. The seasons were changing, the leaves turning gold and red, matching the colors of the expensive koi fish in my pond. My life had blossomed. Without the constant drain of my family's drama and financial demands, my skin had cleared up, I'd lost 10 pounds of stress weight, and I had actually started dating a nice architect named Mark. But the storm was gathering on the horizon. I was having lunch with Mrs. Sterling, one of my firm's biggest clients. She was a real estate mogul in her 70s, a woman made of steel and pearls. She knew my situation. In fact, she was the one who advised me on setting up the LLC to buy the mortgage. So, darling, Mrs. Sterling said, cutting into her salad. How are the tenants? Delinquent, I took a sip of iced tea. 90 days past due. My lawyer sent the notice of default yesterday. Ooh, she shivered theatrically. The NOD. That's when it gets real. Have they reached out? Not since I changed my number. They've been harassing my old office, but I told HR to block them. Just then, my phone buzzed. It wasn't my family. It was Detective Reynolds, a private investigator I had hired after Uncle Joe's tip about the bad money. Ms. Miller, Reynolds' voice was gravelly. I have the file on your brother. Go ahead. It's worse than we thought. It's not just gambling. It's wire fraud. He's been taking pre-orders for a tech product that doesn't exist. He's collected about 50 grand from investors online, and he's spent it all on online poker and luxury goods. Is there an investigation? Yes. The FBI is looking into it. It's small potatoes for them, but once the complaints pile up, they'll move. Also, there's a lien on your parents' house. A lien. I frowned. From who? A bail bondsman. From a year ago. Apparently, your father co-signed a bond for Brandon when he got into a bar fight that got swept under the rug. Brandon skipped a court date, so the bond is due. If they sell the house, the bondsman gets paid first. I closed my eyes. They had leveraged the house, my security for their debt, for everything it was worth. Send me the documents, Reynolds. I looked at Mrs. Sterling. It's time. Time to drop the hammer, she asked. Time to close the trap. If the Fed sees the house for fraud restitution, or the bondsman takes it, I lose my leverage. I need to move on the foreclosure now. I called Henderson right there at the table. File it, I said. Start the foreclosure. But don't put my name on the papers. Keep it under the LLC name, Nemesis Holdings. A bit dramatic, isn't it? Henderson chuckled. It's Greek, I said. Goddess of retribution. File it. 2 days later, the bomb dropped. I received a frantic email from Uncle Joe. Ashley, something terrible has happened. A sheriff came to the house. They posted a notice on the door. Foreclosure. Your parents are losing their minds. Brandon is screaming that it's a mistake. Your mother fainted. They have 30 days to pay the full arrears, or the house goes to auction. I read the email twice. I felt a twinge of guilt, a phantom limb pain from my old life. But then I remembered the worker bee comment. I remembered my room being stolen. I remembered the wedding venue paid for with my bill money. I didn't reply to Joe. I waited. I knew what would happen next. Desperation breeds stupidity. And my family was about to do something incredibly stupid. The thing about secrets is that they are hard to keep in a small world. I had been careful. I lived in a gated community. I drove a different car to work sometimes. I had blocked them on everything. But I forgot about Sarah. Sarah was my best friend from college. We had drifted apart recently, mostly because Sarah was jealous of my career while she struggled with a failing marriage. I hadn't told her about the house, but I hadn't blocked her either. One Saturday, I was at the local high-end grocery store, Whole Foods, about 5 miles from my estate. I was buying truffle oil and organic steaks. I ran into Sarah in the produce aisle. Ashley, her eyes popped out of her head. Oh my God. I haven't seen you in months. You look expensive. She eyed my Celine bag and the diamond studs in my ears. Hey, Sarah, I tried to be casual. Just been busy with work. I heard about your family, she lowered her voice, leaning in over the avocados. Your mom called me. She was crying. She said you abandoned them and they're about to be homeless. It's complicated, Sarah. They kicked me out. Yeah, but homeless. Brandon said you stole money from the family accounts before you left. I stiffened. That is a lie. Brandon is a liar and a thief. Well, Sarah shrugged, looking unconvinced. Anyway, where are you living now? Still couch surfing? No, I found a place. Where? We should do coffee. I made a vague gesture. Up in the hills. Silver Creek area. Silver Creek. Her jaw dropped. Ashley, that's where the millionaires live. I realized my mistake instantly. I'm renting a guest house. It's small. Right, Sarah narrowed her eyes. Well, good to see you. I left the store feeling uneasy. 2 hours later, my security system alerted me to a car at the front gate of the community. I pulled up the camera feed on my iPad. It was Sarah's Honda. She was talking to the guard, pointing up the hill. I watched as the guard shook his head. Goodman, Mike. He wasn't letting her in. But Sarah was persistent. She drove away, but I knew she wasn't done. That evening, the text came. Not from Sarah but from Brandon. Found you. 2 words. Chilling. Then a barrage of texts from Mom. Sarah told us everything. You're living in a mansion, while we are about to be on the street. You selfish, evil girl. We know you used the family money to buy it. Dad is calling the police. You better open the gate when we get there, or we are going to break it down. I put the phone down. Sarah had followed me. Or she had charmed the guard at the shift change. Or maybe she just Googled public records. No, the house was in an LLC. She must have physically followed me home from the store. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. The confrontation. They had convinced themselves of a narrative that suited them. I was the thief. I was the villain. I had stolen their hard-earned money, which didn't exist, to buy paradise, leaving them to rot. It was easier for them to believe I was a criminal than to accept that I was successful, and they were failures. I called the gatehouse. Mike, this is Ashley Miller. I am expecting some visitors. Unwanted ones. I see a moving truck idling down the street, Ms. Miller, Mike said. And a rusty Mustang. A moving truck. I laughed out loud. The audacity. They weren't just coming to yell. They were coming to move in. Should I call the cops? Mike asked. No, I said, looking at the security monitors. Not yet. Let them come up to the main gate. I want to talk to them. Copy that. I poured myself a glass of wine. I went to the closet and pulled out a file, the file containing the deed to their house, the foreclosure notice, and Brandon's fraud evidence. I walked to the front door of my estate. I checked my reflection in the glass. I looked powerful. I looked ready. I walked out onto the front steps, the cool evening breeze blowing through my hair. The rumble of a large diesel engine shattered the peace of the neighborhood. The moving truck turned the corner, followed by the Mustang and my parents' old sedan. They were here. The convoy of entitlement rolled up to the heavy iron gates of my driveway. The moving truck was a cheap rental, dented on the side. My father's sedan looked small and pathetic next to the stone pillars of my entrance. Brandon's Mustang was backfiring, spewing black smoke that drifted over my pristine hydrangeas. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was already out on her balcony with her phone raised. She loved drama, and this was better than anything on Netflix. I stood on the top step of my porch, about 50 yards from the gate. I had the intercom system connected to my phone, so I could hear everything they were saying. I watched through the camera feed as my father got out of the car. He slammed the door. He looked furious but also awestruck. He was staring up at the house, at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern architecture, the sheer scale of it. Mom got out next, clutching her purse like a weapon. Then Brandon and Jessica tumbled out of the Mustang. Jessica was pregnant, or at least, she was sticking her stomach out to look it. Open up, Ashley, my father bellowed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. We know you're in there. He marched up to the keypad and started mashing buttons. I know you can hear me, he yelled. Open this gate right now. You have my furniture in that truck. I tapped the microphone icon on my phone. My voice boomed out of the speaker at the gate, calm and amplified. I didn't order any furniture, I said. They all jumped. Brandon looked around, trying to find the camera. Ashley. Mom screamed, moving toward the speaker. Don't you play games with us. Sarah told us everything. You bought this place with our money. With the money you stole from the family accounts. I didn't steal a dime, I replied. I earned every cent. Unlike some people. Liar. Brandon shouted. You're a secretary. Secretaries don't buy castles. You embezzled my startup capital. That's why my business failed. It's all your fault. The mental gymnastics were truly Olympic level. We are moving in, Ashley, my father declared, trying to sound authoritative, though he looked small through the bars. "We are family. The bank is taking our house because of your sabotage. It is only right that you house us. We have a truck full of things. Now open the gate, or I will call the police and tell them you stole $500,000 from me." "Go ahead," I said. "Call them. Don't test me, girl." Dad kicked the gate. It didn't budge. It was reinforced steel. "I'm not testing you, Robert," I said, dropping the dad. "I'm warning you. You are trespassing. Turn around and leave." "We aren't going anywhere," Jessica shrieked. "I'm pregnant." "You're going to leave a pregnant woman on the street? You monster." "You weren't pregnant 4 months ago when you kicked me out," I countered. "And even if you are, that's not my problem. That's Brandon's problem. We have rights." Mom cried, switching tactics to tears. "We are your parents. We raised you. We fed you. How can you be so cruel? Look at this place. You have 10 bedrooms. You can't spare 3 for your own flesh and blood." "I could," I said softly. "But I won't." "Why?" Mom wailed. "Because," I leaned into the microphone. "I need the space. For my vision." Brandon flinched. He recognized his own words. "You bitch," he snarled. He walked back to his Mustang and grabbed a tire iron from the trunk. "Brandon, don't." Mom yelled, but half-heartedly. Brandon marched up to the keypad stand and smashed the tire iron against the camera lens. The video feed on my phone went black. But I had backups. And I had Mrs. Gable filming from next door. "Open it or I smash the gate mechanism," Brandon yelled. I sighed. I turned to Mrs. Sterling, who had come out to stand beside me, holding a glass of Chardonnay. "Shall we?" I asked her. "Let's go," she smirked. I pressed a button on my remote. The heavy iron gates began to swing open slowly. My family cheered. "See?" I heard Dad yell. "She knows who's boss. Get the truck ready." They scrambled back to their vehicles. They thought they had won. They thought I had caved, just like I always did. They drove through the gates, up the winding driveway, and screeched to a halt in front of my fountain. My father stepped out, a triumphant sneer on his face. "That's better. Now get someone to help unload. My back is hurting." I walked down the steps, my heels clicking on the stone. I stopped 10 feet away from them. I crossed my arms. "Who said you could unload?" I asked. "You opened the gate," Brandon sneered, tossing the tire iron on the ground. "That means surrender." "No," I smiled, and it was a smile that made my mother take a step back. "I opened the gate because the police can't arrest you for trespassing if you're on the public street. I needed you on my property." "What?" Dad frowned. Sirens wailed in the distance. Getting louder. Fast. "You called the cops on us?" Mom gasped. "On your own parents. You threatened to break in," I said. "And Brandon just vandalized my security system. That's a felony, by the way." "You're bluffing," Dad said, but his face was pale. And I reached into my file folder. "I have something else for you." I pulled out the foreclosure documents. But not the ones they had seen. The new ones. The ones that listed the owner of the debt. "You've been wondering who bought your mortgage," I said, holding the paper up. "Who has the power to kick you out of 402 Oak Street?" They stared at me. "Read it," I said, tossing the paper at my father's feet. He picked it up. His hands shook as he read the line, "Lender, Nemesis Holdings LLC." "Who is Nemesis Holdings?" he whispered. "Me," I said. The silence was absolute. "I own your house," I said, savoring every syllable. I own your debt. And as of this morning, I am evicting you. You're lying, my father spat, staring at the document at his feet as if it were a venomous snake. He laughed, but it was a nervous, jagged sound. You? Buy our mortgage? You don't have that kind of money. You're just a glorified accountant, Ashley. Stop playing pretend. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stood there on my stone steps, looking down at the people who had raised me to be a servant. It's a matter of public record, Robert. Nemesis Holdings LLC purchased the distressed note 45 days ago. And since I am the sole proprietor of Nemesis Holdings, I own your debt. Which means I own the roof over your heads. Or what used to be the roof over your heads. This is illegal. Mom screamed, stepping forward, her face blotchy with rage. You can't do this. You went behind our backs. That is our house. We have lived there for 30 years. And you haven't paid for it in 6 months, I replied calmly. You took out a second mortgage to pay for Brandon's legal fees. You took out a third line of credit to fund his startup. You stopped paying the primary mortgage the day I stopped sending my checks. The bank was going to auction it off next Tuesday. I just stepped in and bought the paper. So you saved us. Mom's eyes widened, a flicker of that manipulative hope sparking to life. She clasped her hands together. Oh, Ashley. I knew it. I knew you were just teaching us a lesson. You bought the debt to save the family home. Oh, thank God. Robert, see. She's not a monster. She's a savior. I looked at Mrs. Sterling standing beside me. She took a slow sip of her wine, her eyebrows raised. I didn't buy it to save you, Mom, I said, my voice cutting through the evening air like a knife. I bought it to foreclose on it. The hope on my mother's face shattered instantly, replaced by a look of pure hatred. You wouldn't, she hissed. I already have. The eviction notice was served yesterday via certified mail. You just weren't home to receive it because you were busy loading a truck to invade my property. You bitch. Brandon roared. He lunged forward, scrambling past his parents. He still had that wild look in his eyes, the look of a man who has never been told no in his entire life, and doesn't have the emotional tools to handle it. Brandon, stop. Dad yelled, but it was too late. Brandon charged up the steps. He wasn't holding the tire iron anymore, but his fists were clenched. He was screaming obscenities, frothing at the mouth about what he was owed, about how I had ruined his life. I didn't step back. I didn't need to. From the shadows of the foyer behind me, 2 figures stepped out. One was Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, looking impeccable in his navy suit. The other was a large man in a tactical uniform, my private security detail I had hired for the week, anticipating this exact moment. The security guard stepped in front of me, a solid wall of muscle. He held up one hand. Sir, step back. Now. Brandon skidded to a halt, panting. He looked at the guard, then at me. You think you're untouchable. You think money makes you safe. It's not the money, Brandon, I said, stepping out from behind the guard so I could look him in the eye. It's the competence. It's the planning. 2 things you know nothing about. I'm going to sue you. Brandon screamed, spit flying. I'm going to sue you for emotional distress. For fraud. For everything. Please do, Mr. Henderson spoke up, his voice smooth and dry. I'd love to get you into a deposition, Mr. Miller. We can discuss the $50,000 of investor money you solicited for a product that doesn't exist. We can discuss the wire fraud. We can discuss the interstate gambling debts. Brandon went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. You don't know about that. We know everything, I said. I hired a PI, Brandon. I have the bank records. I have the chat logs. I have the sworn affidavits from the people you scammed. The sirens that had been wailing in the distance suddenly became deafening. Blue and red lights flashed against the trees at the bottom of the hill. 3 squad cars roared through the open gates, followed by a black SUV. Looks like the party is just getting started, I said. My father looked at the approaching police cars, then at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. Real, primal fear. He realized he wasn't the patriarch anymore. He was a trespasser on the land of a woman he had underestimated. Ashley, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Call them off. Please. We're family. We can fix this. We can talk about the room. You can have the room back. We'll kick Brandon out of the attic. Just don't do this. I looked at him, this man who had told me to sleep on the floor. This man who had called me a worker bee. It's out of my hands, Dad, I said. The law is the law. The driveway turned into a chaotic scene of flashing lights and crackling radios. Officer Martinez, whom I had spoken to on the phone earlier, stepped out of the lead cruiser. He was followed by 2 other officers. From the black SUV, 2 men in suits emerged. They weren't local police. They wore FBI windbreakers. That was a surprise even to me. Detective Reynolds must have tipped them off that Brandon was at this location. Everyone stay where you are. Officer Martinez commanded, his hand resting on his holster. Keep your hands visible. Officer. My mother immediately went into her act. She threw her hands up, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling with practiced victimhood. Thank God you're here. My daughter, she's having a mental breakdown. She lured us here. She's holding us hostage. She stole our money and bought this house, and now she's threatening us with a hired thug. She pointed an accusing finger at my security guard. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Officer Martinez looked at her, then looked up at me standing on the porch. He walked up the steps. Ms. Miller, he asked. Yes, officer, I said calmly. I am the homeowner. This is my attorney, Mr. Henderson. I have the deed and identification right here. I handed him the folder. She's lying. Mom shrieked. She's a thief. Arrest her. Ma'am, step back, another officer warned my mother. Officer Martinez scanned the documents. He looked at the deed. He looked at the trespassing complaint I had filed digitally 20 minutes ago. Everything looks in order here, Martinez said. He turned to my parents. Folks, you are trespassing on private property. The homeowner has asked you to leave. You need to vacate the premises immediately. But we live here. Jessica shouted from near the Mustang. We have a moving truck. She invited us. I did not, I said clearly. Officer, if you check the security logs of the gatehouse, you will see they tried to force entry. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, also has video footage of my brother destroying my gate camera with a tire iron. A tire iron. Martinez's eyes narrowed. He looked at Brandon. Is that true, son? Brandon was shaking. He was looking everywhere but at the cop. He was looking for an exit. It was a misunderstanding, Brandon stammered. I was just knocking. With a tire iron? Martinez asked. Before Brandon could answer, the 2 FBI agents walked up. They ignored my parents. They ignored me. They walked straight to Brandon. Brandon Miller, the taller agent asked. Brandon took a step back. We have a federal warrant for your arrest, the agent said, pulling out handcuffs. Charges include wire fraud, securities fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Identity theft? Dad gasped. What are you talking about? Mr. Miller used your social security number and your wife's to open multiple lines of credit to facilitate his schemes, the agent explained dryly to my father. He's also suspected of laundering money through a shell company in Nevada. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a car. My parents looked at their golden child. The boy they had kicked me out for. The boy they had sacrificed their home for. The boy they had called a visionary. He wasn't a visionary. He was a criminal who had stolen their identities. Brandon? Mom whispered. Tell them it's not true. Shut up, Mom. Brandon snapped as the agent spun him around and slammed him against the hood of the rusty Mustang. This is your fault. If you had just given me more money, I could have fixed it. I was gonna pay it back. I just needed more time. The click of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. You have the right to remain silent, the agent recited. Jessica, realizing the gravy train had not only derailed but exploded, did the only thing a gold digger could do. She quietly opened the passenger door of the Mustang, grabbed her purse, and started walking down the driveway toward the street. Jessica! Brandon screamed as they shoved him into the back of the SUV. Jessica, call the lawyer. Jessica. She didn't even look back. She just kept walking, texting someone on her phone to pick her up. My father collapsed onto the stone steps of my porch. He put his head in his hands. My mother stood there, mouth agape, watching her precious son being taken away. Then, slowly, her eyes turned to me. You knew, she whispered. You knew this would happen. I knew he was a fraud, I said. I tried to tell you for years. You told me I was jealous. You told me I was small-minded. Well, who's the visionary now, Mom? How could you do this to us? She sobbed, but the fire was gone. She was broken. We have nowhere to go. The truck, we packed everything. We have nowhere. I know, I said. And that brings us to the second matter. I nodded to Mr. Henderson. He walked down the steps and handed my father a thick envelope. What is this? Dad asked, his voice hollow. That is a formal eviction notice for 402 Oak Street, Henderson said. Since you have vacated the property voluntarily to come here, we have changed the locks. The property is now in the possession of the bank. Or rather, Ms. Miller. Change the locks. Dad looked up, tears in his eyes. But my medicine. Your mother's photo albums. You can schedule a time with the moving company to retrieve your personal effects from storage, Henderson said. The rest of the furniture will be liquidated to pay a portion of the outstanding debt you owe Ms. Miller. You owe me $180,000, I added. That's the principal on the mortgage plus the interest and penalties. I suggest you find a very cheap apartment, Dad. Because your credit score is about to hit 0. Dad looked at the mansion behind me. He looked at the luxury car in the driveway. He looked at the confident, powerful woman standing in front of him. And then he looked at the rusty Mustang, and the rental truck filled with junk. The contrast destroyed him. Ashley, he croaked. Please. I'm your father. No, I said, my voice trembling just a little, finally letting a sliver of the pain show. You're Brandon's father. You made that choice every single day for 34 years. You chose him. You bet on him. You gave him my room. You gave him my money. You gave him your soul. I leaned in closer. You bet on the wrong horse, Dad. And now you have to walk home. I turned to Officer Martinez. Officer, I'd like these trespassers removed from my property. Now. Yes, ma'am, Martinez said. He gestured to his deputies. Let's go, folks. You can't stay here. My mother started wailing as the officers escorted them to their sedan. My father walked like a zombie. They got into their old car. The engine sputtered before starting. They drove down the driveway, following the FBI SUV that held their son. I watched them go. I stood there until their taillights disappeared around the curve of the hill. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Mrs. Sterling. She handed me a fresh glass of wine. "To justice," she said softly. I clinked my glass against hers. "To freedom," I replied. 6 months later, the morning sun was warm on my face as I walked through the garden. The hydrangeas were in full bloom now, explosions of blue and purple against the green leaves. I was hosting a brunch. A real brunch. Not a tense family obligation with store-bought roast beef and passive-aggressive insults. This was a gathering of friends, colleagues, and people who actually respected me. Mark, my boyfriend, was at the grill flipping burgers. He looked up and winked at me. Mrs. Sterling was holding court at the patio table, telling a story that had everyone laughing. Uncle Joe was there too. He looked healthier than I'd seen him in years. I had helped him set up a small retirement account, and he visited me every Sunday. "Hey," Uncle Joe walked over to me, holding a beer. "You got a letter?" He pulled a crumpled envelope from his pocket. It had a prison stamp on it. "It's from Brandon," Joe said. "And there's one from your parents, too." It was sent to my house. I took the letters. I looked at the handwriting. Brandon's was scrawled and messy. My mother's was shaky. I didn't open them. "How are they?" I asked Joe. "Not good," Joe admitted. "Brandon got 5 years. The feds didn't go easy on him. Jessica testified against him to save her own skin. She's living with some new guy in Miami now. And Mom and Dad? They're living in a 1-bedroom apartment on the south side. It's rough. Dad had to go back to work as a greeter at Walmart to pay the rent. Mom cleans houses part-time." I felt a pang of sadness. It was faint, like a distant echo, but it was there. They were my parents, after all. "Do they ask about me?" "Every day," Joe said. "They tell everyone who will listen that their ungrateful daughter stole their house. They play the victim to anyone who buys it. But deep down, they know. I see it in Robert's eyes. He knows he threw away a diamond to keep a stone." I looked at the letters in my hand. "Please, Ashley. We're struggling. Just a little help. We forgive you." They forgave me. The audacity was still there, even in poverty. I walked over to the fire pit where Mark had a small fire going for the ambience. "Everything okay?" Mark asked, seeing the letters. "Yeah," I said. "Just clearing out some old clutter." I tossed the unopened letters into the fire. I watched the paper curl and blacken. I watched the ink disappear. I watched the last tethers to a toxic past turn into smoke and float away into the blue sky. "Ashley." Mrs. Sterling called out. "Come here. We're toasting to the new CFO." That's right. I had been promoted last week. Senior Vice President and CFO. The worker bee was now running the hive. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached all the way to my soul. "Coming," I called back. I turned my back on the fire and walked toward the people who loved me. I walked toward my life.